I remember the exact moment the numbers matched. My phone lit up, my hand started shaking, and somewhere in the back of my mind, a voice whispered, "Your life just changed forever." I had just won $10 million. Everyone thinks they know how they'd feel in that moment. Pure joy, maybe screaming, champagne showers. But for me, there was silence. Not relief, not happiness, just silence. That silence followed me into the weeks that came after: the new car, the penthouse, the freedom to buy anything I wanted. And yet every night, I found myself lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, asking, why do I feel like something's missing? Have you ever gotten exactly what you wanted and felt absolutely nothing? Like the dream you were chasing your whole life finally showed up, and it left you emptier than ever? Comment if you've been there, because I want to know how many of us are quietly drowning in our own version of success. The money didn't ruin me. It just revealed the emptiness I'd been avoiding for years. I filled my days with distractions, travel, noise, endless dopamine hits. I told myself I was living the dream. But the truth? I was just running from the silence. And the silence kept growing louder. People started treating me differently too. Some with envy, others with flattery. But nobody asked how I was really doing. Because when you're rich, people assume you're fine. I wasn't. I was unraveling behind closed doors. I looked successful on paper, but inside, I was spiritually bankrupt. Then one afternoon, while wandering through a dusty bookstore in Oxford, trying to outrun another sleepless night, I found something that stopped me cold. A thin, yellowing envelope, stuffed between theology and poetry. It was old, handwritten, and signed by a name I'd known my whole life but never really understood until that moment: C.S. Lewis. And that letter changed everything. In this video, I'm going to tell you how $10 million exposed a part of myself I didn't want to face, and how the words of a man I never met gave me a reason to start over. If you've ever looked around at a perfect life and still felt alone, this story is for you. Because sometimes the thing we think we want most is the very thing keeping us from what we truly need. The first thing I bought was silence. I paid off my debts, cut ties with obligations, and booked a one-way ticket to nowhere. I didn't want to be around people who knew me before. I wanted to start fresh. Or at least, that's what I told myself. I spent the first few weeks in a kind of daze. Every swipe of my new platinum card felt like rebellion against the life I used to live. I was the kid who worried about rent, who declined dinner invites because payday was still 3 days away. And suddenly, I was the guy eating at Michelin-starred restaurants and tipping more than I used to earn in a day. People say money doesn't buy happiness. But it does buy freedom. Freedom from stress. Freedom from waiting. Freedom from saying no. I had options. I had time. I had space. And for a little while, that freedom did feel good. It felt like breathing after years underwater. But slowly, that breath started to feel hollow. It's hard to explain, but when every yes is instant, when nothing is out of reach, you lose something important: anticipation. There's no build-up, no desire, no tension. Just immediate gratification. It's like skipping to the end of every movie. You get the resolution, but none of the story. My relationships changed too. Friends I hadn't heard from in years suddenly wanted to reconnect. Strangers on social media sent me investment pitches, business ideas, or sob stories. Some of it was genuine. Most of it wasn't. And honestly, I started to resent all of it. I felt like a wallet with a pulse. One of the worst parts? I couldn't complain. Because who would feel bad for the guy who just got rich? Who was I to say I was struggling when I could buy anything I wanted? And then came the loneliness. See, I thought the money would make me feel seen, that people would finally respect me. But what I didn't realize was that the version of me they were seeing wasn't really me anymore. It was the guy with the bank balance. Not the one who still carried childhood trauma. Not the one who cried after parties. Just the surface. I threw myself into lifestyle. High-rise apartments. Designer everything. I tried to manufacture identity through aesthetics. My Instagram looked incredible. My soul, not so much. I started collecting things: watches, art, experiences. Not because I valued them, but because I didn't know what else to do. It was like I believed that if I could just own enough, maybe the emptiness would be too crowded to notice. But that emptiness doesn't care how nice your watch is. It'll sit with you on your private jet just as easily as it did on the subway. It's patient. It waits. I remember one night sitting on the balcony of my new condo, overlooking the city. The light stretched for miles, and yet I'd never felt more in the dark. I had everything, and I had no idea who I was anymore. I started asking myself dangerous questions. Why do I need to prove my life is good if it actually is? Why am I still performing for people who don't even know me? Why do I feel lonelier in a crowd now than I did broken surrounded by real friends? And something even darker crept in, guilt. Guilt that I had been given what so many people dream of, and I didn't feel worthy. I didn't feel grateful. I felt lost. Like maybe the universe made a mistake. That was the paradox. The money changed everything around me, but inside, I was still the same scared, searching, insecure person. Only now, I didn't have excuses. I couldn't blame the struggle anymore. The struggle was gone. What was left was just me. And that was terrifying. Because for the first time, I had no distractions. No next milestone. No more grind. Just mirrors everywhere I turned. The kind of mirrors that don't show your reflection, they show your avoidance. So I traveled. I flew across continents hoping geography would change psychology. Bali, Italy, South Africa. I kept moving so I wouldn't have to feel still. But I always came back with the same ache in my chest, like I was carrying a suitcase packed with questions I couldn't answer. And when all you see is yourself, you either get to know who that is, or you spend the rest of your life running from them. I didn't know it yet, but I was about to do both. There's a strange kind of ache that comes when everything around you looks beautiful, but none of it feels real. That was my life. Every room I walked into smelled like success. Marble countertops, floor-to-ceiling windows, champagne always chilled. And yet, under the surface, I was breaking in ways no one could see. Because how do you tell someone you're suffering when your life looks like a dream? I started waking up later and later. Not because I was enjoying my rest, but because I didn't want to face the day. My mornings became voids. My phone would buzz with notifications, people wanting things, brands offering deals, fake friends fishing for favors. And I felt paralyzed, like I was being swallowed by my own life. So I stayed busy. I hosted parties I didn't enjoy, invited people I barely liked, and smiled through conversations that felt like sandpaper to the soul. I remember standing in the middle of a packed living room one night, everyone laughing, music pulsing, and I felt completely alone. I looked around and thought, none of these people know me. And worse, I don't know me either. I began drinking more. At first, it was social. Then it was nightly. Then it was just routine. A glass to take the edge off. Then two. Then enough to forget there was an edge at all. And when alcohol stopped numbing the noise, I turned to other things, expensive distractions, reckless decisions, anything that gave me a temporary escape from the ache I couldn't explain. People kept telling me I was living the life. That phrase became a trigger. Because I was living a life, but it wasn't mine. It was a curated version built on projections, the image of someone fulfilled. But behind the scenes, I was falling apart. There were nights I'd stare at the city skyline and wonder what the point was. I had everything, money, recognition, options, but no joy, no purpose, no peace. And the scariest part? I couldn't even cry about it. I was numb, completely and terrifyingly numb. I started questioning my sanity. Was I just ungrateful? Was I broken? Why couldn't I enjoy the things everyone else seemed to want so badly? I Googled things like wealth and depression and rich but empty. I found forum posts from people whispering the same things I was too scared to say out loud. That money doesn't kill your sadness, it just removes the reasons you used to blame it on. I remember walking into my closet one morning, rows of designer clothes, shelves of sneakers still in boxes, and I just sat on the floor and laughed. Not because anything was funny, but because it was all so absurd. I had spent months building a life that looked perfect in pictures, and I was cracking like cheap glass behind the scenes. I called an old friend once, someone who knew me before all of this. I tried to open up. I told him I wasn't okay. He paused and said, "Bro, come on. You've got millions in the bank. You're fine." And just like that, I shut back down. Because if even he couldn't see past the money, what hope did I have? That's the thing no one tells you about sudden success. It isolates you. It puts you in a cage made of gold, and everyone assumes you're royalty. But inside, you're pacing, clawing at the walls, desperate for someone to just look at you and ask, "Are you really okay?" I wasn't. I started canceling plans, stopped replying to texts. I watched entire days pass without stepping outside. My life became a loop, sleep, scroll, sip, repeat. And the more disconnected I felt, the louder the darkness became. And then came the night I almost gave up. I won't get into the details. Not here. But I will say this, no amount of wealth protects you from pain. If anything, it isolates you from the lifelines that keep most people tethered to hope, community, struggle, shared humanity. I had spent so long trying to escape the grind that I had accidentally escaped meaning too. That night, I sat with my phone in my hand, staring at a blank message screen, thinking of who I could talk to. Who would understand? Who would believe me? I didn't send the message, but I also didn't follow through with the thoughts in my head. I just sat there, shaking, breathing, unraveling. And something cracked open in me, not the polished kind of epiphany you read about in self-help books, but the raw, ugly kind. The kind that whispers, you can't keep living like this. It wasn't a solution. It wasn't hope. But it was the first honest thought I'd had in months. I needed to stop running. From myself. From the image. From the pressure to pretend. But I didn't know how. I didn't even know where to start. And that's when life, divine timing or pure randomness, threw something unexpected in my path. A flight delay in London, a rainy afternoon, and a quiet little bookstore I wandered into just to get out of the cold. What I found inside wasn't peace. Not yet. But it was the beginning of something. It was a letter. A forgotten piece of paper with a name I hadn't thought about in years. A name that would slowly, profoundly, and unexpectedly pull me back from the edge. C.S. Lewis. I didn't know what I was looking for when I walked into that bookstore. Maybe warmth. Maybe quiet. Maybe just a reason not to think. But I know exactly what I found. The store was small, older than most, the kind that smelled like dust and memories. It didn't have digital signage or fancy displays, just shelves, chaos, and the kind of silence that feels sacred. The kind of silence you can hear yourself in. I drifted through the aisles without a plan, brushing my fingers along the spines. Some titles I recognized. Others felt like relics. Philosophy, theology, poetry, fiction, it was all there. I wasn't drawn to anything specific until I turned down the last row, near the back, where the lighting flickered slightly and everything felt a bit forgotten. That's when I saw it. Wedged awkwardly between two leather-bound volumes of theological essays was a worn collection of letters. No dust jacket. No barcode. Just a faded spine and initials in gold foil, C.S.L. It wasn't even shelved properly, more like it had been returned by someone who didn't care where it went. I pulled it out, sat on the cold floor, and started flipping through. And then I saw it. A folded piece of paper, slipped inside page 217. Someone had used it as a bookmark, but it was more than that. The paper was thin, yellowed, edges curled like it had been handled too many times. On it was a short letter, handwritten, signed Jack. I later learned that's how Lewis signed many of his personal letters, and formally, to friends and strangers alike. The letter was addressed to a man named Robert, dated 1953. Just 4 paragraphs. But those paragraphs wrecked me. Lewis was responding to Robert's admission of despair, how he'd reached success but felt numb and directionless. Sound familiar? The first paragraph was empathy. Not advice. Not theology. Just presence. Lewis acknowledged the pain, honored the silence, and gently wrote, "It is not unusual to reach the summit and feel nothing. The view may be beautiful, but we do not always feel its beauty when we are starving inside." I read that sentence again. And again. Because that was me. The second paragraph leaned deeper. He talked about the difference between happiness and wholeness. He said happiness was often confused with sensation, comfort, excitement, pleasure. But wholeness was rooted in something deeper, honesty. Humility. Connection. He wrote, "You are not a machine to be calibrated by external winds. You are a soul, aching to be seen by something greater than success." I could barely breathe. The third paragraph shifted. Lewis began writing about longing, the spiritual kind. He called it the ache of eternity within us. A yearning for home, not just a place but a state of being. He said we try to silence it with pleasure, power, or distraction, but it always returns. That longing isn't a flaw, it's a fingerprint of something divine. When we feel most lost, it may be because we are closest to truth, standing on the edge of what truly matters. And finally, the last paragraph. This one wasn't philosophical. It was fatherly, gentle. He told Robert not to panic. That numbness isn't failure. That silence isn't absence. That often, the loudest truths arrive in whispers. He ended with a sentence that has haunted me, in the best way, ever since: "Do not mistake quiet for emptiness." Sometimes, God speaks softest when we have finally stopped shouting. I closed the book and just sat there, holding the paper like it was oxygen. My eyes welled up. Not the kind of crying that comes from a single moment, but the kind that rises from years of holding it in. I hadn't cried in months. That letter broke the dam. It wasn't just what Lewis said. It was how he said it. No pressure. No answers. Just grace. The kind of grace that tells you, you're not crazy. You're not broken. You're just human. I bought the book. I asked the cashier if they knew the letter was inside. They didn't. I asked if I could keep it. They looked at me like they saw the look in my eyes and simply said yes. Back in my hotel room, I read the letter a dozen more times. I typed it out. I printed it. I underlined it. I stuck it on my bathroom mirror. It became a kind of liturgy, a reminder that I wasn't alone in my emptiness, and that maybe, just maybe, this ache was the beginning of something sacred. And here's the thing, Lewis didn't offer solutions. He didn't say, here's how to fix your life. What he gave me was permission. Permission to feel. Permission to be confused. Permission to stop pretending. I needed that more than anything, because I had spent months trying to patch my pain with money, image, and distraction. And all I really needed was someone to tell me that the pain itself wasn't shameful, that maybe it was telling me something. That letter didn't solve everything. It didn't suddenly make me joyful or motivated or spiritually enlightened, but it gave me a place to start. It gave me permission to sit in the ache without rushing to escape it. And most of all, it gave me a new question, not what do I want to do with my life, but what is my life trying to tell me? That question would change everything. That question would change everything. Because it wasn't about fixing myself anymore. It was about listening to the part of me I had silenced with achievement, with image, with noise. It was about honoring the discomfort instead of masking it. It was about asking better questions, not searching for prettier answers. In the days that followed, I carried the letter with me like armor. Every time I felt that creeping emptiness, while scrolling through social media, while attending another hollow dinner, while waking up feeling numb, I'd take it out and read one line, one phrase, and let it recenter me. I started journaling again. Not to post, not to share, just to hear myself. I wrote without filters, without audience, and for the first time in months, I heard my own voice again. I started wondering about the things I used to love, the simple ones, the quiet ones. Writing, walking, long conversations that weren't about networking or branding or success. And I realized, maybe healing wasn't about adding more to my life. Maybe it was about remembering what mattered before the world told me what to want. C.S. Lewis reminded me of that. Not through a sermon, not through a bestseller, but through a forgotten letter never meant for me. A moment of wisdom passed from one broken man to another, and somehow, through time, to me. And maybe now, to you. Because if you're listening to this right now, and any part of this story feels familiar, if you've ever sat in a beautiful room and felt empty, if you've ever looked at your life and wondered why it still doesn't feel like enough, then I want you to know something. You're not weak. You're not broken. You're not behind. You're just being invited to go deeper. And sometimes, the invitation shows up in a whisper, signed by someone who saw it all, long before you did. There's a specific kind of pain that doesn't feel like destruction. It feels like awakening. That letter didn't just move me. It broke something inside me. And what spilled out wasn't more sadness. It was honesty. For the first time in months, maybe years, I looked at my life without flinching, without filters, without defending it to myself. I saw it for what it really was, full of noise, but hollow at the core. A masterpiece of performance. A void dressed in success. That realization wasn't pretty. It wasn't cinematic. It was quiet and brutal. I sat in my hotel room, staring out at the gray London sky, and I just let the numbness sit beside me. I didn't try to fix it. I didn't open Instagram. I didn't call anyone. I just listened to it. And slowly, something shifted. I started noticing things again. Noticing how I breathed. How I'd been holding tension in my shoulders for weeks. How I hadn't really looked someone in the eyes in days. The letter didn't just rewire my thoughts. It brought me back into my body. Back into reality. That week, I canceled 3 meetings. I turned down 2 interviews. And I booked a train ticket to Oxford, not for content, not for status, but because I wanted to walk the same streets where Lewis once wrote. I didn't know what I was hoping to find. I just knew I needed to go. The trip was quiet. No plans, no agenda. Just me, walking in the rain, notebook in hand. I visited Magdalen College, wandered through gardens, and even sat on a bench for almost an hour doing absolutely nothing. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty for it. That stillness felt like defiance. Back home, I started changing things slowly. I didn't sell everything and become a monk, but I did start saying no. I started logging off. I reinstalled silence in my life like it was an operating system I forgot I had. I stopped trying to outrun my discomfort and instead asked it what it wanted to teach me. And it taught me a lot. It taught me that I had never really defined success for myself. I had inherited someone else's definition, more, louder, faster, and blindly chased it. It taught me that luxury isn't the opposite of loneliness. That you can be surrounded by beauty and still be starving for connection. That presence can't be bought. It also taught me that healing isn't a straight line. That some days I'd feel peace, and other days I'd feel like screaming. That's okay. Progress isn't about always feeling good, it's about showing up anyway. I started therapy. Really started. Not the performative, yeah, I talked to someone kind, but the gut-wrenching, ugly crying, confront your childhood kind. It hurt. It humbled me. It healed parts one didn't know needed healing. I stopped trying to curate my emotions. I let them be messy. I also started writing again. At first, just in my journal. Then slowly, more publicly. Not to be profound, but to be real. I stopped chasing viral. I started chasing truth. The kind of truth that feels uncomfortable and sacred at the same time. And something beautiful happened. People started reaching out. Not brands. Not fake friends. People. Strangers who said, hey, I felt that too. That connection, the honest kind, felt better than any brand deal or luxury trip ever had. Because it was real. It was mutual. It wasn't about what I had. It was about who I was becoming. The shift wasn't dramatic on the outside. But inside, it was everything. I started seeing wealth differently. Not as something to show off, but as a tool. A responsibility. A means, not an identity. I donated more. I helped without posting about it. I stopped asking what I could gain and started asking who I could serve. That one letter rewired how I think about purpose. It stopped being a big, lofty question and started becoming small, daily decisions. Purpose isn't always epic. Sometimes, it's just choosing honesty when lying would be easier. Sometimes, it's listening when you'd rather talk. Sometimes, it's staying still when everything in you wants to run. I used to think rock bottom was when you lose everything. But now I know, real rock bottom is when you have everything, and you realize it means nothing without connection, without truth, without soul. C.S. Lewis didn't save me. He didn't need to. What he did was remind me that redemption doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes, it comes quietly, in the form of words meant for someone else, but spoken straight into your heart. That's what this shift was. Not salvation. Not success. Just a return. A return to myself. To the person I used to be before the noise. Before the striving. Before the mask. And that version of me? He wasn't perfect. But he was real. He asked questions. He stayed curious. He believed there was more to life than just winning. I think we all need to go back sometimes. Not to stay, but to remember who we were before the world taught us to pretend. That's what the letter gave me. Not answers, but memory. And permission. Permission to feel lost. Permission to ask again. Permission to begin again. And that's exactly what I did. But beginning again didn't mean burning it all down. It meant rebuilding, brick by brick, but this time with truth in every layer. I didn't need to abandon my success, I just needed to stop hiding behind it. I started asking better questions when I woke up. What would make today meaningful, even if no one sees it? Who can I encourage today, even if they don't thank me? What part of myself needs kindness, not correction? And slowly, I started living instead of performing. Some days, I still feel the old pull, the urge to numb, to flaunt, to escape. But now I recognize it for what it is, not failure, just fear. And fear, like all feelings, doesn't need to be fixed. It just wants to be understood. That letter broke me, but it also reintroduced me to a version of myself I actually liked. A version not obsessed with control or optics or validation. Just a human being, alive, flawed, awake. And that is a kind of wealth no lottery can buy. It's a strange thing to say out loud, but I'm grateful I won the lottery. Not because of what it gave me, but because of what it revealed. See, most people dream of sudden wealth like it's the end of a journey. The finish line. The moment where life finally starts. But what no one talks about is what happens after the dream comes true, and you realize you're still the same person inside. Money is a magnifier. It doesn't change who you are. It just removes the noise, the excuses, the grind, the reasons we tell ourselves we're not happy. And when all of that is stripped away, you're left with the truth. And the truth is, I didn't know who I was without struggle. My identity was built on climbing, being the underdog, the hustler, the one who beat the odds. But once the game ended and I had nothing left to chase, I panicked. I didn't know what to be without the pursuit. And that's when I realized I had never been chasing success. I'd been running from myself. So what did $10 million teach me about purpose? First, purpose has nothing to do with achievement. Purpose isn't a goal you reach. It's a direction you move in. It's not a title or a number or a follower count. It's the feeling you get when your actions and your values are in alignment, when what you do reflects what actually matters to you. For so long, I thought purpose meant impact on a grand scale, building something huge, being seen, being celebrated. But real purpose? It's quieter. It's more personal. It's in the details, the way you listen, the way you show up, the way you love. Second, more will never be enough if you're filling the wrong hole. I spent months trying to outrun my emptiness by adding more travel, more gadgets, more experiences, more attention. But the hole wasn't outside me. It was internal. And every external wind just echoed louder inside that hollow space. Purpose begins when you stop trying to escape your pain and start trying to understand it. When you stop asking, what can I get, and start asking, what am I really missing? Third, the most expensive things in the world can't buy the things you actually need. You can't buy trust. You can't buy belonging. You can't buy meaning. You can buy the illusion of those things, sure. You can rent moments that feel like connection. You can curate an identity that looks loved. But eventually, the truth catches up. And when it does, it asks you, what are you building your life on? For a while, I was building mine on ego, on aesthetics, on attention. It looked solid from the outside, but the foundation was dust. What I needed, what I really needed, was integrity, alignment, stillness, a sense of inner quiet that didn't depend on whether people liked me or whether I was trending. And here's the hardest part to admit. I had to lose my illusion of success in order to find my sense of self. That meant redefining almost everything. What does success mean now? Not numbers, not noise, but depth, peace. Days where I feel proud of how I treated people. Nights where I can fall asleep without distraction. Moments of silence that don't scare me anymore. I've also learned this: pain can be a compass. For a long time, I saw pain as failure, proof that I was doing something wrong. But now I see it as feedback, as an invitation. Sometimes the things that hurt us most are the very things trying to redirect us toward who we're meant to become. The pain of emptiness showed me where I wasn't aligned. The pain of loneliness showed me where I'd abandoned real connection. The pain of numbness showed me where I stopped feeling and needed to come back to life. And no, I don't think suffering is required for wisdom, but I do think that honesty is. And most of us won't be honest with ourselves until we're forced to be. My wealth forced me to look in the mirror, and what I saw wasn't glamorous, but it was true. And truth, I've learned, is where purpose begins. If you're watching this and wondering how any of this applies to your life, especially if you haven't won the lottery or don't have millions to wrestle with, let me say this: you don't need to lose everything to start over. You don't need to wait for some big turning point or collapse. You can start asking better questions right now. You can pause. You can look at your life honestly. You can ask, am I chasing this because I want it, or because I'm afraid to stop? You can ask, what makes me feel alive, even when no one else sees it? You can ask, what would I do differently if I believed I was already enough? And maybe most importantly, you can stop pretending that the highlight reel is the full story. You can let go of the image. You can admit you're tired. You can choose truth. That's what $10 million taught me. Not how to win, but how to return. To humility. To honesty. To something deeper than approval. To the version of me I buried under performance. And from that place, that real, raw, quiet place, I started living again. And from that place, that real, raw, quiet place, I started living again. And here's the beautiful part: life didn't get more perfect. It got more honest. And in that honesty, I found a kind of peace that wasn't performative. I didn't need the applause anymore. I didn't need to win the room. I just needed to feel aligned with what I believe, with how I live, with who I love. Some days I still forget. I still get caught in the loop. But I always come back to one truth: purpose isn't a finish line. It's a posture. A way of being. A quiet yes to living truthfully, even when it's hard. So if you're feeling lost, empty, or unsure, maybe you're not failing. Maybe, just maybe, you're closer to purpose than you think. If I could go back to the day I won the lottery, I wouldn't change the numbers. I wouldn't reject the money. But I'd change what came next. I'd pause. I'd ask deeper questions before I made bigger purchases. I'd invest in conversations, not just companies. I'd protect my solitude like gold, and I'd never trade it for noise. I'd understand sooner that having the power to do anything doesn't mean you should do everything. Because now I know, you can win everything and still lose yourself. What I'd do differently is simple: I'd listen earlier. To the ache, to the silence, to the parts of me that didn't want more, but wanted meaning. I would have stopped chasing an identity built on applause and started chasing one built on peace. That's the thing no one tells you when you're dreaming of success. It won't save you, but it can show you. Show you who you are. Show you where you've been hiding. Show you where the healing still needs to happen. And if you're brave enough to listen to what that success reveals, you just might find something better than happiness. You might find clarity. You might find yourself. So here's my question for you, and I want you to really think about it. Not later. Not someday. Now, if all the distractions stopped, what would your life be trying to tell you? What would rise to the surface if everything else fell quiet? What would be left if you stopped performing and just existed? Really sit with that. And when you're ready, scroll down and leave your answer in the comments. Because someone else might need to hear it too. Your honesty could unlock something in them. And if this video meant something to you, even a flicker of recognition, a breath of relief, a quiet me too, hit that subscribe button. Not because it helps the algorithm, but because it tells me there's more of us out there. More people looking for something real. Welcome to One Chair Empty.